way that we do. I am aware that the names, even if you half learn them at home or at school, can be bewildering. All those people beginning with A, Achilles, Actaeon, Artemis, it is easy to balk at the sight of them. But trust me, I felt the same way, and I have lowered us gently into this bath. As Ovid once wrote, it is no crime to get lost in a dark wood, but at least I have provided a glossary. And I have started just a few steps back in time with Lord Byron, because he was obsessed with Greece and died there, and because he believed that his life was entwined with an oak tree that he planted at his home in Nottinghamshire when he was 10 years old. An old Greek idea. He thought he would wither if his tree did the same, just like a woodland nymph, although they would never have made their way this far into the chilly north. I also discovered the 2nd century CE writer Pausanias, who wrote the gigantic and compelling Guide to Greece. I spent much of my working life writing and editing and planning guidebooks, and he is the forerunner of us all. So along with Byron, who had a copy in his luggage on his first trip to Greece, I clung tight to Pausanias, who writes with vivid clarity about the sites that are still there, and the many that are not. He was living at a time when the world was losing its faith and about to embrace a new one, and, let alone for anything else, I am glad I read him for that. Above all, Pausanias could have told us, any Greek could, that everything hangs in the balance. It is easy to despair when the news can seem so unrelentingly awful, but all I can tell you is that I went looking for beauty and hope, and I found them both. Peter Fiennes, London, 2021. Chapter 1. Half Empty. I am afraid that this sounds flippant, but I don't mean it to be so. Letter from Lord Byron to Thomas More, 8th of March, 1822. I hope that this is right. The remnants of a dead oak tree are propped up on the lawns at the front of Newstead Abbey in Nottinghamshire. The tree was planted in the autumn of 1798 by George Gordon Byron, who was just 10 years old at the time, and trying to absorb what it meant to be the future 6th Baron Byron of Rochdale, or Lord Byron as the world would come to know him. He had not grown up expecting to be a baron and lord of a vast estate, at least not for the first 6 years of his life. But the previous son and heir had been cut in half by a cannonball in Corsica 4 years earlier, and Byron's great-uncle, the wicked 5th Lord Byron, had died of rage in May, aged 78, worn out, they said, by orgies and Satanism, having driven away, or murdered, his wife and taken up with the housekeeper, and been forced into selling everything he could lay his hands on, which included the many beautiful and ancient trees in Newstead's once lush woodlands, but also most of the contents, portraits, furniture, jewellery, of the defunct and derelict house and abbey. And young George's father, mad Jack Byron, could not become the next baron because he had already expired, probably of tuberculosis, perhaps taking his own life, 7 years earlier in France, where he had been living in enthusiastic incest with his sister. There was something, people said, about the Byrons, some stain in the family, an original sin that tainted every successive generation. A very Greek idea. But this is why little George had travelled down from Scotland to Nottinghamshire, where he had been living frugally with his mother, and why he was now destined to spend his life as the 6th Baron Byron of Rochdale, lord of a bankrupt estate, and inheritor of the family curse. Or so we're told. It was soon after he arrived at Newstead in September 1798 that George planted the sapling that lingers as a bleached husk on the front lawn. It is a ridiculous place for an oak tree. Right up close to the house, blocking the view of the lake, a child's idea of where a tree should live, with no thought for the future, or how an oak can grow. The man who bought the estate from Lord Byron and paid off his debts wanted to have it chopped down until he was stopped by a gardener who told him that this was the tree that the poet had cherished. Perhaps it was an acorn, not a sapling, that Byron planted. In any case, it's the kind of thing a mother would allow, who needed to bring a smile to her little boy's face, hoping to hold his hand as he limped around the overgrown and forlorn gardens in the autumn rain, the house with half a roof, the woods tormented and felled. Or maybe it was the servant who was with him that day who helped him plant the tree, May Gray, who was fired not long afterwards for reasons that we may have to come back to. There is so much we will never know, although stories cling to Byron like feathers to hot tar, many of them generated by him. We do know that Byron nursed the idea that his fate was umbilically linked to this tree. As it fares, he said, so will fare my fortunes. He was shocked when he returned.